everyone, and welcome back to another video. My name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. And today I'm going to be sharing with you guys some biblical fiction book recommendations for books about the Exodus. So if you don't know, the Exodus and the story of Moses is one of my favorite Bible stories personally, so you can bet that I have a lot of books in my collection that also focus around this exact same topic. So this is probably going to be one of my more lengthy videos. If you didn't know, I've been doing a series lately where I've been sharing some biblical fiction book recommendations that are based off of Bible stories. For instance, the last video I posted would have been biblical fiction books based off of the story of Rahab, and today's video is of course based off of Moses and the Exodus. So I'm going to be kind of doing these weekly for a little while, see if you guys enjoy them, and just talking about some books that are centered around particularly prominent or famous biblical stories or Bible figures. This is by no means an exhaustive list. This just happens to be the books that I own or that I have and that I think are really great or that I've read or heard a lot about that are on my shelves. I do not own every biblical fiction book in the world, much to my dismay. Let's just get into the recommendations portion of this video. So the first book that I have that is going to center around like the life of Moses and the Exodus, these are actually going to be a duology. And the first one, I mean, honestly, you guys, you can probably guess it. If you know what book I'm going to say, put it in the comments because you know me, right? The first book that I'm going to recommend is The Pharaoh's Daughter by Misu Andrews. This is, of course, about the Pharaoh's daughter, the one who drew Moses from the Nile, gave him his name, raised him in Pharaoh's palace until, you know, he came of age, and then some bad things happened, and he went off to wander in the desert before coming back to say, let my people go. But this is a book about that, about her story. It's really incredible. Most biblical fiction, I found, tends to center around, like, the female perspective in Bible stories. So obviously, not many of these actually have Moses as the main character. It's usually a female figure in Moses' life and the story told from their perspective. So again, keep that in mind when I'm sharing these recommendations. The second one that I'm going to be sharing with you guys is Miriam, which is obviously the story from Moses' sister's perspective, Miriam. And this is a duology. It's called The Treasures of the Nile duology by Misu Andrews. And this is literally, I'm actually using the word in the correct sense for once. This is literally the first biblical fiction book that I ever read in my life. So I cannot recommend it enough because it is what got me started. It got me hooked on biblical fiction. And as we know, it has taken over my entire life. So there's that. But these books are really amazing. They're full of depth. I love Misu Andrews' interpretation of the characters, and I also love the amount of research that went into these books. If you flip to the back, you can find the author's note that explains, you know, where she did her research, how she came up with all of the story elements that she did. She's an incredible author. I love her so much. She's great. You should definitely go and check her out. And while you're at it, check out these books if you're interested in books about the story of Moses and the Exodus. There's actually a lot of biblical fiction series that focus around the Exodus, so there's going to be like multiple books that come up in this. But another one comes from self-published author Jennings. She's incredible. She's a real inspiration to biblical fiction writers everywhere. But she wrote these two books. The first one is called Midwives of Moses, and the second one is called Wilderness Wanderer. These two books are the first two books in her Faith Finders series, which actually spans multiple books. But these two specifically focus on stories that take place during the book of Exodus. This book focuses on Pua, who was one of the midwives mentioned in Exodus that did not kill the babies, even though Pharaoh commanded them to kill all the children. And Moses escaped and survived and went down the river in a basket. But this is about her story, what the Exodus might have been like from the perspective of the midwives. And then this one is again another adaptation of Miriam. I really enjoyed this one. It's very different, very, 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 very different from Miriam. And Miriam is kind of like these two books are my gold standard for biblical fiction, but I really enjoyed this interpretation as well. And I loved this one because this one had a lot of like strong female characters, and the strong female character aspect was very evident in this book. So I highly recommend that you go and check these out. They're really sweet books. She's a really great author, and they're self-published, and you know, support indie authors because indie authors matter. After that, we're going to be getting into some Connie Lynn Cassette books here, and how could you guys not know I would be mentioning Counted with the Stars and Shadow of the Storm. Counted with the Stars is book 1 in the Out from Egypt series. It is possibly my favorite Egyptian Exodus-centered book ever, and it's about what the Exodus might have been like from a completely fictional character. Her name is Kia, and she's an Egyptian, and it's about the Exodus from her perspective and how she kind of views it. And this one is about wandering in the wilderness and the desert and that kind of thing, and the golden calf and all that from the perspective of Shira. Yes, Shira. I still remember it. I still got it. This one is about Shira. She is an Israelite. She's one of the Israelites. They become friends. It's really great. I'm not going to give you spoilers, but you should definitely read these books. This book is on a completely different person, so it might not necessarily be Exodus related, but it is definitely Moses related to a certain extent, and this book is Slender Reads by Texie Susan Gregory. I don't have a lot of positive feelings about this book personally. I personally felt like it dragged on a bit. It was really slow, and then for me, when I read biblical fiction, I tend to expect there to be like a message at the end, some closure, something I can take away from it and learn from it. And for me, I just didn't feel like I learned a lot from this book, but it is the story of Moses' mother, his birth mother, and I really enjoyed that perspective, and I think it's a really interesting story. And I've never read a biblical fiction book, well, I had never read a biblical fiction book from her perspective before when it comes to Moses, but I do recommend it if you're interested in Exodus stories and Moses related stories, because it is one of them. It's not maybe my personal favorite, but I do really appreciate it, and it's really interesting. So if you'd be interested in something like that, make up your own mind about it. Make sure you read it. Don't take my opinion as like the end all be all opinion of biblical fiction books. I may own a lot of them, but I am not by any means the only reviewer of biblical fiction. Lots of people have loved this book, so make sure you go ahead and check it out. Slender Reads, everyone, by Texie Susan Gregory. I forgot like 5. Oh no. The next book that I'm going to be recommending to you guys is a Guideposts exclusive book. If you don't know, Guidepost is currently doing this series right now where you can subscribe, and then every month they'll mail you a new biblical fiction book in the series. It's called Ordinary Women of the Bible. You should definitely check it out because I think it's a really cool concept, and I just love the idea of like a biblical fiction subscription essentially. You can buy the books individually, but overall it's probably a better deal if you subscribe, but you can cancel at any time, so there's no restrictions if you decide you're not wanting to keep reading them. But one of the books that I wanted to recommend is A Mother's Sacrifice by Carol Towris. This is another retelling of what the life of Moses' mother might have been like, so be sure you go and check that out, especially if maybe you were interested in Slender Reads and you want even more from that perspective. I highly recommend this one, and I highly recommend that you check out the Guideposts exclusive series because I'm subscribed and I'm loving it so far, so there's that. A couple other biblical fiction books that have to do with the Exodus and the wandering in the desert and all of that would be In the Shadow of Sinai and By the Waters of Kadesh. These are also by Carol Towris, and these are both really good. They center around, I believe, mostly fictional characters. These are a couple of different interpretations. This one takes place before the Exodus all the way up until, you know, right after the Exodus, and this one takes place during the years of wandering. So these are really good. I actually really enjoyed the writing style. This one in particular, I enjoyed like the symbolism and the metaphor and just how like the lessons the main character learns throughout the book tie together at the end. It's really great. And you should definitely check these out. These are a part of a series. They go together, so there you go. I'm now realizing that I think Moses might be a popular subject for biblical fiction. Another book that is kind of related to Exodus, but maybe not as directly as some of these others, would be Lioness by Barbara M. Britton. This is book 1 in a series of books that reimagines the life of the daughters of Zelophehad. I hope I pronounced that right. And these take place after the Exodus, during like when they're settling and wandering and all that stuff. And these daughters, their father dies and they have to fight for their land. This is a true story. This is mentioned in the Bible, and it's really eye-opening, really well written, very emotional, and again, hugely strong female characters in this book. This is also an autographed copy, so thank you, Barbara. I've had the pleasure of reading and reviewing her books now for a while. I reviewed this one in December, and I've got a review coming out for Heavenly Lights, which is book 2 in this series. But she is an incredible author, and I really loved this interpretation. And I loved seeing more of this, because I feel like a lot of books center specifically around like the Red Sea or the plagues or those bigger events. And this one in particular kind of settles around or centers around what happened after that. You know, what were their lives like afterwards? I don't hear people talking about this book enough, guys. So seriously, go out there and get yourself a copy of Lioness and check out the Daughters of Zelophehad series by Barbara and Britton, because you will not be disappointed. Oh, the stack is getting so high. Can you still see it in the screen? Yeah, I think you can. You're fine. You're fine. So the final book that I have to recommend to you guys is actually a novella in a novella collection, but I do recommend the whole collection. So there's that. And that is the Sons of Encouragement series by Francine Rivers. This novella collection is unique in the fact that it's part fiction and then part kind of Bible study to a certain extent. So each story has like, it's a story, obviously, and then there's like a little Bible study thing at the end with questions for discussion and some verses for you to read, some things for you to ponder, and just ideas. But anyways, in the Sons of Encouragement series, this actually begins with a novella from the perspective of Aaron, who is Moses' brother, and that is another one of those perspectives that I don't think we get enough of in terms of biblical fiction retellings of Exodus. So this is definitely one that I recommend. I have read it. I have stuck post-it notes in the tabs. It is one that I have loved. So there you go. That is that recommendation. And those are all of the biblical fiction book recommendations that I have to share with you guys for biblical fiction books that center around the life of Moses and the story of the Exodus. Do I even want to try and pick up this stack? I don't think I do. So there's that. So in conclusion, those are all some great books. If you like Exodus stories, be sure you go and check those out. And don't forget to check out the links in the description box below. Once again, my name is Jenna Van Mourik. I'm an inspired writer and an inspirational fiction reader who reads, writes, and lives for Jesus. You can find all of my links and everything down in the description. I have a website. I do social media. I'm mainly active on Instagram at Jenna Van Mourik, where I post literally, well, not literally. Again, I use literally too much and it's a pet peeve, where I post almost every day pictures of what I'm reading, what I'm writing, and what I am doing with my life. You can also check out my book club, Biblical Fiction Buffs on Goodreads, which is an online book club and discussion group for fans of biblical fiction. Again, all the links to everything you'll ever need are in the description box below, so make sure you go ahead and check those out. Thank you guys again so much for watching. Let me know if you've read any of these books in the comments below and what you thought about them, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!